Hi, everyone. It's Michelle Jackson, the founder of the Black Writers Workspace, and I am here today for our second Pen Posse Roundtable discussion. The today is a group of writers who will be joining me on screen very, very soon to talk about this topic that I think is something that many of us can connect with. From a writer's perspective, we are often finding ourselves doing just that, writing through the pain, talking about pain that we or have experienced individually, professionally, personally, and using that pain to create stories, to build characters, to talk about things that may be personal in a very impersonal way in some instances, especially if you write fiction. So today we will deal with writing through the pain from the perspective of why we write. We're going to be talking about finding peace within the pages. We're also going to dig into transparency and a number of different issues. But before we get into it, let's do a couple of things. Housekeeping rules. First and foremost, please share this page on your personal Facebook page. Share this link, on your personal Facebook page so that everyone will have an opportunity to take part in this amazing discussion. This is all about just sharing information. This isn't, we're not all experts. We're here to talk to you about how we wrote through the pain, how that pain allowed us to create great works of art, and how if you're in that moment of writing a memoir or writing fiction or dark fiction, and you know that everything that you write is very personal. I mean, the characters may not be you, but you're taking different elements, different characteristics from people you know, from your own experiences. And so I hope that you will share this link on your page right now so that as many people as possible can participate. Also, we ask that you ask questions. You can drop a question on the page. You can get into our comment section, our chat boxes, and we will definitely have your questions addressed by our panelists. But for now, let's introduce our panelists. Well, bring them on the screen and have them to introduce themselves, and we're going to talk about writing through the pain. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey,
Can you hear
hello,
me?
hello.
Great, 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 great. I'm Michelle Jackson. I am the BWW founder. Founded BWW back in March of 2020. Something I was doing because I just dropped my second novel, From Darkness to Night, and I was just looking for a way to connect with other writers. I thought that I would connect with 100 people. I'd never started a group before, and instead we have 3,400 readers and writers on this page in less than a year. So now we are rolling out a number of different initiatives, things that we feel will help people, writers, and readers learn more about the craft of writing. And this is one of those amazing projects, which is the Pen Posse Roundtable. And if you can see my shirt, I don't know if you can, but we got these Pen Posse shirts here. And so we're hoping everybody will get one. But our goal with the roundtable is to find a group of writers who want to share their experiences around a particular topic. And today's topic is writing through the pain. So I know some of you I don't. That's what I love about this roundtable, is because we can connect and learn about each other. This is going to be an open discussion where we're respecting each other's opinions, we're learning from each other. And as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about writing through the pain, but we're going to look at it and deal with certain elements of it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why writers write. Why do we write? Then we're going to talk about finding peace in the pages, peace between the pages, developing stories that inspire. Then we're going to talk about faith in writing, which I think is very important. And then we're going to look at exploring the next level of transparency. Now, what is pain? What is writing? Why do so many of us write our pain? We're going to go in deep with a lot of those different pieces. I'm here to moderate. I'm not a therapist. So we're going to work on this together, learn from one another. But there are two things that I'm hoping that we walk away with, and I hope the people who are watching us will learn. And that is, I'm hoping to put out some writing prompts. So for each of you, start thinking about prompts that you use to help you to digest and dissect what you're feeling so that you can articulate it on paper in an impactful way, and strategies for working through the pain that you're writing about. So before we go into that, I want everyone to introduce yourself, tell us about your work, and tell us why you chose to be a part of this particular roundtable. And if you can, let's try to limit to about 3 minutes per person because we want to get through all of our 5 areas. And we also want to take questions from the audience. So let's start with you, Andrew.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Snorton. I'm based out of the Atlanta, Georgia area. To date, I've written 3 books, and later we'll be releasing my 4th audio book. I would say the main things are, I think, and all of us can say, the hardest part about writing is getting started. And then once we identify how we're able to get started, and once you get into the habit of writing, whatever that looks like to you, the ideas are going to come. And when you think about pain, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit deeper, that can definitely be a motivator. Sometimes it can limit you because you're so caught up in whatever is going on. But it's the proverbial, even though you're feeling some type of way, you know you can't be stuck there. And you have to identify what are things that will get you unstuck or get you moving to where you can look at things like you mentioned in the preview, whether it's through the lens of professional, personal, you can look at it more so as what did you learn from this versus something that kept you down. So, like I said, I know we'll go in more depth and detail, but I'm just happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alexandria?
Yeah, so my name is Alexandra. I write mainly for on the topics of mental health and poverty. I started actually blogging on the topic after my own experiences, and I'm currently working on releasing that in print form. But I guess for me, I would say that getting to the heart of the story is what's been on my mind, and just learning how to get deeper, and that is not exactly easy sometimes when you're trying to delve into sensitive topics. And I think that's a struggle, I think, for a lot of us writers who especially draw from our own experiences. And yeah, that's something I think that we often have to explore as well as writers. And I guess that's where community comes in.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us as well. Ashley? Ashleah? Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, Ashleah. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashleah. I'm very excited to be here. I write for Pride Lands, which is a web comic, and I also was a romance ghostwriter for a few years. I just finished a children's book, and I'm working on a few other pieces. I'm leaning more towards screenwriting, so that's kind of like where my vein has been lately. I love writing. It's catharsis for me. I started out writing plays for my siblings when I was a kid back in the Bahamas, where I'm from, because my mother and father did not like the internet or cable. They thought that it was of the devil. So we had nothing to do but books. Like, what is that screen for? It's not for anything but watching Christian television. That's all it was for. So it's like we had a lot of time to make up stories. I guess for me, when I'm making a character or coming up with a story, I try to figure out where are they, what do they want, and what will they do to get it. That is the extent of every story I've ever written. If my character is a dragon, is it okay with being a dragon? Where does that dragon live? In a mountain? Okay, well, what does it want? Okay, it wants fire-breathing power. Well, can it get it on that mountain? Then no, it has to leave the mountain. You know, I think oftentimes we overcomplicate stories and we get kind of caught up. I deal with insecurity a lot, as I'm sure other writers do. But I think if you can just simplify it down to that want, like what do they want externally, that physical thing, and then what do they want inside? And with dealing with pain, I love how when I can't solve my own problems, I can solve my character's problems. So it kind of feels good. It's like in my real world, I may not be able to figure out how to figure out racism and classism and sexism and all that stuff. But let's see if my characters can figure it out. And that's a fun journey for me. But yeah, I'm excited to learn and listen and get to know y'all. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, so south of Atlanta, North Florida. And I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes,
RJ?
Hello, everyone. I am RJ Boyce. I am the author and poet. And I'm also the author of the unexpected and forthcoming book of poetry coming. It's interesting that Alexandria mentioned how she writes about, I believe you said it was, I can't remember, but I know what you were saying. It was about mental health. That's what it was. And my poetry is about the microaggressions of Black women, and depression and poverty is intertwined in that. So that's the forthcoming book. And I am also the author of The Unexpected, which is currently out now on Amazon. You can also go to my website and pick it up, which is www.authorpoetrjvoice.art if you all are interested. And I been writing since I was very, very, very young, like maybe 8 or 9 years old. That's when I started writing. I am out of the Cleveland, Ohio area, nice and cold and snowy up here. Storm just passed, and I'm grateful for that. Um, and yeah, I write all the time, different characters. I normally write about people of color and Black women because that is what I am. So,
So, in one word, everybody, tell me what level or what pain or trauma were you trying to write about in your last or your first, or pick a book that you have that you wanted to deal with in one word? Let's start with you, Alexander.
Uh, I guess you could say I was trying to deal with resilience. So that's the word of depression.
Andrew?
I'd say the one word would be perspective, based on the first book I did, where before you feel like everything is really tumbling down, it's like pause, get perspective, and take inventory.
Okay. RJ?
um, I would say courage, to get the courage to get up and do, regardless as to what anyone may say or think, or what you even may think of yourself. So,
Ashley? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay? I would say
Yes.
my word is authority. Basically, who has it, who deserves it, and who should get it next.
So, in my first book, and I'm probably going to go a little deep, but I want us to have a very open and honest conversation about writing for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I don't know about you guys, but so often I hear people say, why is it that Black movies, Black books are always about something sad or something negative, drug dealing, slavery, depression, racism? I don't know. I hear that a lot. And I hear that mostly from African Americans who feel like, as writers, as creative souls, that what they're exposed to about our work is always so negative. And as a writer, I've had to deal with that. I've had to sit with myself and say, do I make a happy story to make people feel good about themselves? Should I just make my story happy? And then you have to ask yourself, is not pain universal? Is not trauma universal? We all experience pain and trauma in some form or fashion. And as writers, as creative souls, why do we need to not be real and authentic in our work? Because we're trying to make people feel good about themselves. And so I've had to ask myself that question as I've written my books. My first novel, The Heart of a Man, is deals with a great deal of guilt and frustration of a wealthy Caucasian gentleman who has everything in life, but he's still unhappy. That book, just like my second book, From Darkness to Night, opens with the main characters trying to commit suicide. I did not make the connection that this is the direction I have a tendency to write in until after I got into the midway point of my second book. And I said, why am I starting books with people trying to commit suicide? And I think it's because I have an interest in understanding the complexities of the human spirit. I like to take my characters from their lowest place to a better place. And I won't say the highest place because I don't really see life as being, we get to that place and then everything is great. I think we get to a place, we're always on this journey to getting to somewhere better. And so that's how I build my characters. That's how I explore pain in my books. But my books are also a lot about my own experiences. The first character who looked nothing like me, act nothing like me, but also was experiencing everything that I was experiencing in my own experience, in my own life, which I just lost my mother. So he was having nightmares about the death of his mother. I was having nightmares about the death of my mother. He experienced survivor's guilt in many ways. Why did she have to go and not me? Those are things I was thinking in my mind about. And in my second book, From Darkness to Night, which is an urban fiction about a young girl growing up in a neighborhood very similar to my own, who deals with a great deal of guilt over what she experienced in her brother's death, which she blames herself for. So I'm dealing with a level of guilt, something that I struggle with. Did anyone find that in writing, it really is so therapeutic? It's more about you personally, or are you really trying to build characters that are opposite of you? Anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll start. The first book that I did, Deeper Than Your Deepest Sleep, Thoughts on Love with Joseph Snorton, it's actually a poetic take on like real conversations with the long lost family member. And while the first half is really me talking with him, the second half is him talking with me. And one of the trauma pieces that was reinterpreted was really based on the breakup of a relationship. But and the way I did that chapter, that particular chapter was the only one that really deviated from the rest of the format. So it was like part one of it was like the refined look, and part two was just the raw and uncut, because people needed to see like both sides of that, to quote, just be upfront, be frank, and get it out of their system. But even at the very end, as tough as that chapter was, the last two chapters were probably the most difficult, but the most cathartic, because the next to last chapter is looking back at everything through your lenses and trying to put two and two together. Then the final chapter is more of that redemptive chapter, where it's more of that spiritual conversation. So while the entire book didn't deal with trauma per se, it was opening up on a couple of those things. And getting back to your point, there are times you have to talk about it. Sometimes it is for you, but sometimes you know that you are helping put the words together for others who are going through something, like they have it here, but they don't feel comfortable yet putting it here. Now, is that the only thing you're going to write about? No. Is that the only thing I write about? No. But every once in a while, whether that's your area of focus or periodically, we have to do that for checkpoints and taking inventory. Because as one of the other authors said, when you think about not talking about it and how that's a gateway for, let's say, mental health and things along those lines, and we know where those disconnects come with access to resources or just talking about it, we still have to talk about these things because they are still an issue. Are these the only things we talk about? No. But you have to. And you have to be open, whether, like I said, that's your area of focus, or periodically, you've got to be open to having that conversation.
Great response. Anyone else want to dive into that?
I'll say 2 points to that. I was watching a class that was talking about story arcs and characters and all that fun stuff. And essentially, the point that this is a screenwriter, he said, when it comes to making a story for an audience, they need you to do 50-50, a 50-50 rule, 50% familiar, 50% brand new. And oftentimes for Black writers, that 50% that is familiar involves trauma. That's how I'm going to reel you in, because whatever story, if it's a baby daddy story, if it's a police violence story, that 50% of the story is going to resonate. So that's going to bring you in. But that other 50% is going to have to be your unique spin on whatever that traumatic situation is. Like all the hate you give is a unique spin on police brutality and basically standing up for yourself in the community. But there's other stories that do the same thing, but they do it through a different lens. So part of it is we have to give grace to the whole story and not write it off just because we're like, oh my God, here comes another slave movie. Well, you don't even know what they're about to say. Like, read the description before you get the whole story down. They could be doing like the slaves going to space. We don't know. Like, you might watch Lovecraft Country and be like, man, they talking about a civil rights movie. But that's like movement. But you're gonna miss a whole arc because you limited your perspective as a reader because you assume, and we all know what that word does, right? Right? We assume, right? So that's my part one. Give the whole story a chance so you understand what it is before you say what it is. The second part of it is probably the opposite, which is trauma porn. Like, don't be being traumatic for just being traumatic sake, right? Don't be throwing things in the story just because you think it's going to give flash value, right? So if we talk about, I'll use movies because again, I like to write screenplays as well. So if I say Wild Wild West, Will Smith movie right now, a lot of people think of one big imagery, which is a giant robotic spider, right? And even the writer said that the spider was probably nothing to do with the story. Wild Wild West is about Will Smith escaping slavery and killing off Confederate generals. Does anybody remember that as the plot of the movie?
No.
No. You remember flash, bang, shooting, robot spiders, explosions, because they did that just to get your attention, but the story was whack and it wasn't developed. So that's what I think in our community trauma porn is, and you're just doing it. Like, it's kind of like, you talk about people who like lie and say they're from the hood, bro, you all the way from the suburbs. You've never gangbanged once in your life, but you're going to try to sell that as your lifestyle because you think that's what Black people want. Baby, I did not grow up on anybody's corner. So that's not going to resonate with my Blackness, but I have cousins where it will. So you got to just be truthful in that story. Like, will your character actually hold a gun? Or are you putting this gun in the story because you think Black people need to see guns? Does your character actually sell crack, or do you just think crack sells? So it's like, I think it's with every story, whether you're Black or whatever, you got to figure out this arc. Who is this character? What the hell is this story? Sorry, pardon my language. Before you just start throwing stuff in the story, you just got a whole gumbo soup, crack, guns, police. And you're like, who is this story for? Like, don't just put it just for putting its sake. But if it is true, then put it. So that's just how I feel kind of about the whole trauma, pain, Black story narrative. That's just my personal perspective. If it works, yeah, throw some crack in that story. But if it's not working, why is crack in the story? So
I think that is so interesting. Great points. All of them. Great points.
Thank you.
Everyone. I think that is interesting. Something I've learned with the BWW page, because now I'm on the outside looking in to other writers. I'm connecting with them, reading their works, reading their synopses. There is a great deal of pain in the Black story.
Yeah.
I've seen pain. I've read books and synopses and connected with writers who were talking about things I didn't even know existed. I grew up in public housing. I grew up in what I guess people will consider the hood. I never saw drugs. I grew up in the most loving community you would ever imagine.
There you go.
We all have different experiences, but the reality is that our work, there is a great deal of pain in our work. And a lot of us are using this, and I'm directing this question to Alexandria, because you're talking mental health, is that a lot of us are using the writing as a way to deal with the trauma and the pain that we are experiencing in our lives. And I don't think anything is wrong with that, because pain is a part of life, but so is love. So is, so many other things. And many of us, and this is another thing that I have a problem with, is I don't think these are always sad stories just because you're dealing with trauma and pain. It's just a part of the story. It's a part of the human story. I mean, we're in COVID. I mean, there are going to be comedies about COVID. There are going to be satire stories about COVID, but the reality is this is a tough time. So it's all in how you interpret it. So Alexandra, talk to us about mental health in writing. And is I've just heard the term grief journaling, which I'd never, you know, done that before. I do a lot of journaling, but I never thought about it from that perspective. I'm sure some of my writing people would say this is grief journaling. But talk to us a little bit about the idea of just African Americans writing and pain and getting people, those who are looking at our work to move past the idea that there is pain in our work and harping on that. Just like as Leah said, don't stay stuck on that element of it.
Mhm.
There's a bigger picture in the art.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely kind of resonate with what you're sharing in terms of, I guess when I first publicly shared my story, it was a long form feature on online capacity, and I lost there's a loss of connection because of the fact that I was very graphic about my own experience with depression, and I think it's unfair because there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of mental health and addiction, and there's research that shows that there's survival. There's a survival component in terms of, especially when you're drawing from your own experiences. Them writing that story is what they need in order to survive. We need to get those stories out. We need to talk about that. And sometimes it's not going to be pretty, but that's kind of what has to happen in order for healing to begin. And sometimes you're not ready to tell that story. So you have to, there has to be kind of some kind of self-awareness and realizing, are you just kind of just hashing out and just kind of drawing up bitter emotions that don't need to come out? Or are you just really needing to start noting down that story for your own purposes? Like, why are you telling the story and why now? And I think there needs to be maybe some support of a therapist or somebody that can walk along with you in some cases, depending on the cases. But there is healing, and I am also very, very familiar with that term, grief journaling. Journaling is part of how you get there. And in some cases, people that take on these, take this on, it's some of them don't even have to be writers, but they kind of discover things about themselves through that. And that is what's necessary in order to get to the next level of their journey. And so I think it's not just about talking about pain and it's all depressing and nobody wants to read that. It's more about it's needed for their own survival, for their own well-being. It's something that has to happen. And so sometimes that will make you have to recall things that are hurtful and damaging, but in doing so, you're kind of drawing on things that might, in the long run, help not only the writer or the participant, but someone else down the line that needs to live to see another day.
I want to build kind of a strategy as we talk, especially around writing prompts. So feel free to put any writing prompts in the comment area. I will share those with the public. That's for everyone, or anything that you're thinking about that we need to share that we may not be able to get to. I really love what everyone is saying, and I think it's great that we're talking about writing through the pain, because I feel like this is an issue or a topic that needs to be dealt with because it's being dealt with in the writing. I've read so many indie books, like I said, over the last couple of months that deals with, first of all, incarceration. A lot of people who come out of out of prisons decide to write about their experiences. I've read about incest and drug dealing and just so many different things that are impactful, and a lot of family drama. But I've also read about a lot of love and that beautiful Black love that it just radiates through these stories. We can't get caught up in the negative, thinking that that's what it's all about. It's not. I mean, my story may have pain in it, but at the end, there is a level of redemption, a level of turning lives around and doing the right things, and it's okay. So let's move to finding peace between the pages. And I think about RJ. Tell us a little bit about how writing has been therapeutic for you and how you found peace between in the pages of your work, because I know you write fiction, correct? And I write fiction too, and I love, after I write something, I love to write. I don't know about you guys. I'm just I love to write. I think it's just that it just, I don't know, I can't put it into words. Maybe someone can help me with it, but there's just something that you feel after you've completed something and you go back and you read it, it feels like you've birthed something
Mm-hmm.
into the world. You literally feel that you've birthed something to the world. But guess what happens before a baby comes into the world? There is what?
A lot
Pain,
of pain.
right? And
Right.
that's why we want to deal. So we're not dealing with it from the pain of we're just going to sit here and talk about all the negative. We're going to talk about what the pain results in. What do we birth into the world through this pain? So RJ, talk to us a little bit about you. Did you find any peace between the pages as you wrote your fiction?
I write fiction and poetry, and a lot of it is, some of it is me, and some of it is not me. Some of it is the pain of women that I've grown up with, or friends. Um, Men, it's just the pain of my people, and some of it is the joys. That's the reason why I wrote The Unexpected, because I mixed it with people of color. We make money. We also go through funerals and deaths, and we have life. So it was a mixture of everything in there, as far as I can um, think of. So there's there is pain for me. Growing up, I was in a domestic violence home. So that's how I began writing as a 9-year-old little girl. That's how I could express. I couldn't tell my father, stop beating my mother. I was too scared. So that was the way that I was able to express and find peace in the pain as a young child. And that evolved as a grown woman, and many pains come even from being a woman in the Black community, and the depression. So there, for me, it is peace with it, because it's like you said, it's a release that comes with it. Once you, it's like something that doesn't taste good in your mouth, and you taste it and then you spit it out. That's how I do it. I just get it out on the page, and it's there. Guaranteed someone knows what that tastes like. So it's for me and for the reader, or whoever, may read it. And to see another day, you never know. You
Mhm.
just really never know. So it's definitely therapeutic and peaceful for me. That is my go-to after God. Thanks.
Nice. Anybody else want to talk about this? Finding peace between the pages. And as a screenwriter, Leah, you talked about you want to write movies, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. I thought about that last night when just looking, at some of the topics I wanted to address with this group is that the movies, Black movies that are hitting the scene can sometimes be tough. I mean, like I said, 12 Years a Slave. I remember watching that movie and going home and just
I
like,
had
I don't want to
nightmares
see
from that
anybody.
movie. Yeah, I had nightmares from that movie.
You could, I'm sorry, say that again.
No, I said I had nightmare. Like it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
cinematically speaking, it
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful, but
Mm-hmm.
it was so real that I had nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
And
just
so,
like, ooh.
yeah. And this is why I want
One
to,
of my neighbors, his
this
parents
is,
were saved. So it's
yeah.
like, yeah, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to talk about this finding peace between the pages? Because I find peace between the pages.
Yeah.
Writing is my peace, and being authentic, which is the undertone of this conversation altogether, where I think we're all going to go, is the importance of being authentic, regardless of what the world says. If your truth is pain, then we want to see the pain. If your truth is love, we want to see the love. So, anybody else finding peace between the pages?
And the
Andrew?
oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
sure. And like others have said, when you're writing about that challenging topic, whether it's something you personally experienced, you've done research on taking inventory of other people's experiences, it comes back to one of the things I said earlier. You're not only helping you find your voice, you're helping others find their voice. And if part of finding their voice is all these things I've held back, like a true story, when I remember doing a book signing a few summers ago back where I grew up in New Jersey. And one of the people who got the first book that I did talked about like that chapter I referred to regarding the breakup chapter. She articulated, was like, that's exactly how I felt and how I still feel, even though that had happened years ago. So part of finding peace is that you're finding your voice, you're helping other people to find theirs, and tying in with the mental health piece that's been talked about. If part of finding your voice is to say, this is something I've been holding on to at least get that conversation going, and whether formally or informally, getting the encouragement, help, whatever. So it's real powerful what we're doing. So whether we're talking about trauma or just, like I said earlier, the hardest part about writing is getting started. So even if you're just journaling about your random ideas and what have you, just putting it out there, you're not worried about the format or the length. You're just putting it out there. And now that you're putting it out there and you're looking back, then you can kind of siphon through and sort through and say, this is the direction I want to go in, or this is the direction that I need to go. And like other people have said earlier, even if other people thematically have talked about the same thing, they haven't talked about it or written about it the way that you can. And you are able to reach readers, fellow writers, etc., that maybe other people can't reach. And that's okay, because there's still a space at the table. There's a seat at the table for everybody.
And I think what I want to add to that too, and I love that, thank you so much for sharing that, is you can all share your pain metaphorically. I think sometimes people are scared to put that, like people don't want to put out, I was sexually assaulted, like, and I actually was. So, so you may not want to show that. So I'm going to relate to like screenplays a bit as I'm talking, but like Maleficent, a lot of women wrote that when her wings were cut off, that reminded them of their sexual assault. And it's been hinted that even the filmmakers, like that might have been a part of that analogy because it happened at night and it was a man in her bed that did it. So she didn't explicitly say, okay, this fairy witch person was raped, but that could be alluded to through that. Same Edward Scissorhands, but Tim Burton said that Edward Scissorhands represented all the bullying and the how ostracized he felt in his suburban community because he was such a weirdo and so different. So it's like, if you're a writer and you're up and coming, or even if you're experienced and you're just like, I don't know if I'm ready to put this piece out. It's a little bit too personal. That is the beauty of metaphors. We as humans communicate through story. We've been finding our piece through pages since we first discovered fire and sat around that campfire and was trying to explain safety using allegory. So it's like, if you're trying to tell your story and explain pain, and don't be afraid of metaphors. Don't be afraid of using symbolism and dragons and space. And like, even if you can talk about police brutality in a sci-fi odyssey. Like, you don't have to limit yourself. And I think if I were able to just talk to every up and coming Black writer that is worried about that, like, if I put myself out there, that now they're gonna know my business, or everybody's already done this before. That is the beauty of metaphor. Like, white writers for ages have been putting their pain into symbolism. Charles Dickens is one of my favorite writers, and he has so much of his pain hidden between the lines of Oliver Twist and all of his movies, his books. You know what I mean? Like, it's layers to it because he was trying to decipher all the problems London had classism and poverty and child work laws. So instead of him saying child work labor laws are bad, he showed you Oliver Twist. And you're walking through Oliver Twist's life, watching this little boy beg for more food and being thrown out into the street. And then he has to join a gang. And then he has to like fight for his life. And then the gang is trying to attack him. So it's like, he didn't explicitly say, hey, London, we have a class problem and we treat children like crap. He said, no, watch this child. And then you tell me if this looks familiar. So as writers, we can be creative. We can tell people the truth without telling them that we're telling them the truth. And that's where I get that piece, because I know what I'm saying. And something in your subconscious is going to get what I'm saying. You think you're reading about a dragon, but then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. Why is this dragon treated differently than these other dragons just because the scales are different? That's going to hit something, I think, in our subconscious, because as humans, we don't always like being told what to do. We like being shown what to do. So if you show me through a story, I just gave you a whole moral lesson through a story without telling you explicitly, don't treat Black people like crap. That's not nice. So that's
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That is exactly what when I think about children's books, They do a fantastic job of dealing with issues and making it fun and whimsical, but also punching hard in many ways. Talk about race issues, to talk about bullying, and no one complains. And you said something that also that I think, I wanted to kind of weed into what I said earlier about the fact that as white writers have been doing this for a very long time and they can deal with their pain, but we seem to get more of the criticism behind it. Do you guys think that that is because there is a belief that as Black writers, we're not deep enough to be able to give our stories and tell our stories in a way that is not, that's kind of subliminal.
Oh, I think it's because, I think it's because Black humanity is still up for discussion.
Have that. Explain that.
Because I think when you look at white people, you think that that is the neutral description of all humanity. So when I see a white woman get on a plane and pack up her bags and leave her life and decide to trek through Africa, that's the universal message of discovery as a woman. But if a Black woman does it, then it's like, Black women don't do that. They don't discover and go travel. Meanwhile, I did it. I did it. My sister right now lives in Scotland. Like, she's been living there for years on a whim. She just wanted to discover it. And she met her fiance there. But Black people's humanity is still up for discussion. They're still discussing if we have human experiences. Eddie Murphy was talking about when he came up with the idea of Boomerang. He didn't write the screenplay, but the idea of Boomerang, that romance comedy, was Eddie Murphy's idea. And he said white studio execs were like, Black people own publishing, like they own companies, like they have love triangles, like that's like a thing that Black people do. And we're like, yes, we have all of these experiences. Black people have been millionaires since the 1800s. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we have lots of experiences, but I will go back to my original statement. Our humanity is still up for discussion. And because it's still up for discussion, our stories are still up for discussion. And
whose fault is that? How do we, as eliminating what what white people may feel, how are we playing into that? Because I feel like we play into it too much. So, Andrew.
And to piggyback on that point, the operative word is narrative. And you think about the narrative. The greatest example of the misuse of narrative is the perception of Africa versus the reality of it.
Right.
So now fast forwarding to what we need to do, part of it is why we're even here today. It's about amplifying people who are writing about, our narratives. So whether it is through health or overcoming trauma or business or whatever, part of it is where we felt like we had to buy into a different standard, just to put it mildly. And if things didn't match that standard, then there was something that was less than. But what we've all got to understand is, like I was saying earlier, there's still more to our narrative than what's been put out there. And, like I said, the importance about today and, festivals and all that and all of our work is we've got to continue to constructively control our narrative to the best of our ability and amplify our narrative. And part of, regarding the amplifying of the narrative is this is me working through the lens of press and media. Part of the reason why certain stories are duplicated is look at the makeup of your news editors. And most of your news editors, whether it's in radio, television, what have you, do not look like anything like this panel. And I can tell you that from even when I did my baseball book. I'm pretty much the only person out. I was the only person out there. So you can fill in the gaps right there. But again, we have to understand that we control our narrative and we have to amplify our narrative, whether through traditional, innovative, whatever. And as what was said before, even with the rediscovery this past year or whatever, Black humanity, as our colleague said, is still up for debate. And knowing that, it's like we just have to take ownership of who we are, whose we are, and amplify what we're doing. We need to amplify what our peers are talking about on this panel with poetry, because that's what it's depth. Because think about a song, some of the most powerful messages what come through music, 2, 3, 4 minutes long. So you don't have to knock you don't say, well, poetry lacks depth. No, poetry probably has more depth, and it's probably the most accessible form of reading and writing. So we don't need to belittle poetry. That's still providing a voice. Whether you do the traditional deeper textbook, that's still providing a voice. If you're more middle of the road, it's still providing a voice. So we have to continue to amplify as constructively as possible with all the platforms that we have access to. We have to.
I 100% agree. I'm sorry. Somebody.
No, all I was saying was I definitely agree with that. And you just gotta like I've been going back to the library, ask for Black authors. Like I like right now, Black authors. Like I love mystery. So Walter Mosley, I love sci-fi, Octavia Butler. So it's like, before you say we're not out there, go to the library, get a free library card, and go and say, hey, where are the Black authors that write this? That way you can make sure you're well-spoken in the conversation, because how can we criticize white people for not amplifying our voices when you can't name 5 Black authors?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly one of the reasons why I felt like this was a great panel to talk about the pain, is because we have too many. To me, we were bumping our heads up against the ceiling in our own community when it comes to writing and craft and what's acceptable. We limit ourselves by saying, no, I want to see more books. I mean, more stories about love. Okay, there are tons of books about Black love, but if we're not going to go out there and buy them, support them, if only those who if only Black book authors that hit the bestsellers list are the books that you're going to seek, then you're not going to always find the amazing breadth of books and stories out there. And so we have to be the one to stop saying this work shouldn't be sad, or it shouldn't be about gangbanging or whatever it's about. Your story is your story, and start accepting, okay, this is one individual's perspective. I accept it. If the dragon is talking and talking about bullying, I accept it that it's written by someone Black. I get that they understand where they're going with this story. I saw something last night that really got me, which was One Night in Miami. I don't know if you have all seen that, but it's you've got Malcolm X and Sam Cooke and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown all in a room after Muhammad Ali becomes the world champion, and they're talking politics. They're, being, brothers. They're arguing with each other. They're having these very insightful conversations that are very telling of the time. Now, I know it's a fictional story based on some reality. I think they did meet, but no one really knows what happened in the room. But I bring it up because I've read their work, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, to see this brotherly love in this way, in this room, why did that shock me? Why did that shock me?" And that became a problem that I had with myself. We have to stop being amazed that Black people are amazing.
Right. Oh,
okay. Wait.
We have to stop
Run that back. Run that one back.
We have to stop being amazed that Black people are amazing. I think that's my brother always say, we're magical people. Yes. And I think we forget that, and we limit ourselves. Yes. We limit ourselves, and we criticize each other's ideas and works and passions, and we have to stop. We have to stop doing that. So we're going to move into developing stories that inspire. And you probably saying, well, how we talk about pain and inspiration in the same breath? Because we can. Once again, we're amazing people. We can do this. We can have pain and trauma, and we can have inspiration along with it. And it's okay. And I bring this up because this morning on the page I wrote, I posted a question about what was the pain you were looking to expose or explore in your work. And I got people just started chiming in. A lot of pain, about molestation, about this, about that. But they're putting these things on. We're putting this information on paper, not to make people sad, but to let you know we're human.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We experience things too.
Mhm.
B, to teach. I may have made some mistakes. Don't make the same mistakes. C, because pain is universal. We all experience it. It's something that connects us. And it's okay. But there are writers out there, and I want you guys to speak to this, to the idea of developing inspirational stories. Speak to these writers who are afraid to explore and to push themselves out there. And I'm going to say this one thing. I don't want to take up all the time, but bottom line is this: when you become a writer, there is a contract. I feel that there's a subconscious contract that you sign, and that is the contract of I'm going to expose something about myself. You can't write without transparency. Okay, you
Yeah.
cannot write a good book without transparency. And I've read books where people stayed on the surface, and you can tell it from the first word that they're not about to go deep. I don't even want to read this because they're not writing from a place from their gut. They're writing from, let me just write what the reader wants to
Yeah.
hear about. So let's talk a little bit about writing, developing stories that inspire. And I want the undercurrent thing in your mind is to be about transparency and honesty. And how do we develop those stories? Are there steps that you take? Do you journal? Do you blog? Are you into your faith? What is it that helps you to get to that honest place of transparency? And let's start with Alexandra. You want to start with this? I can't
You're
hear
muted.
Sorry.
you.
She touched on a lot of different points that are that's part of how I develop or tap into my vulnerable self. It's, I guess, a series of different things that may not necessarily be pinpointed, but it's evolves over time. I started being vulnerable actually not really wanting to. It was just more so that I was seeing a need in terms of the treatment, especially within the church, of people who have struggled with mental health challenges. And I was just seeing um, a lot of things being said and done that was just really destructive for someone's healing. And I started just because actually out of my own personal journey, not because I wanted to share publicly, but actually part of how I just delved into that authentic self was my family members kind of promoted that. So I think part of how I started that is by just your family will make you will help you keep it real because they will tell you they know you. They'll know when you're doing things or saying things that are not in line with who you are. And when you slip a little bit, they'll remind you. So I guess part of how I started becoming more authentic was my family around me and the community that I decided to involve myself around with. And also just you mentioned journaling, that was a huge part of it, and taking my own personal reflection time and trying to delve further into not only who I knew myself to be, but who I wanted to become. And that was part of, I guess, how I started on the journey to developing my authentic self and starting to share more publicly about my own mental health challenges and experience of poverty.
Anybody else?
I'll go after. I'll go after you.
Hmm?
I'll go after you.
Yeah, well, I just, like I said previously, it took me a while because growing up in it and then mimicking it afterwards, and then having to put all of the details down of the journey, of the losses, of being homeless with two little small girls. That took a lot, and all the mistreatment and no food or barely any food or just a low state. That it took a while for me to get to actually, I can say it, but to put that detail down, especially in poetry form or in story form, it took me a while. I journaled over time, but that was extremely traumatic, and it was a lot of situations with the abuse that happened. So just the detail to get through that for me, it took a while. So that's my transparency. That crap ain't easy. It's some real hard stuff to deal with. And usually women that are abused in that way don't say anything. So it's almost like I don't want to say I forced myself to do it, but in a sense I did, because after a while it wasn't about me. It was about who else can I help get up from that? Who else needs to know that this is not the business? Really. So that was my way of doing it.
RJ, I had a question for you. So when you made the decision to expose these things about yourself, whether it's in your poetry or your fiction, what was, I know you want to help, but it had to be a moment where you just knew this has to come out of me in this form. I mean, because you could have sung it, you know what I'm saying? But you wrote it. So I always wonder about that moment because it's a big moment. It took me, my first book, I wrote it in 2 years because it was fun. It was something I was doing on the side. I wasn't thinking about it from a business perspective. I was just writing. My second book, From Darkness to Night, because it's in a community where I grew up in, because the character seems a little bit like me, and I know there was going to be some issues and people asking me if it was me. It took me 8 years to write it. No, it took me 2 years to write it and another 6 years to get it out because I was so worried that this was going to expose something and was going to hurt somebody. Tell me about the moment that you decided, you know what, I got to do this. This got to come out of me.
Well, for my health and sanity, if you want to talk about me,
Mm-hmm.
that's got to come out. Again, it goes back to what I was saying. Something don't taste good, I'm not going to keep eating it. It's disgusting. So it has to come out. It has to come out. And it came out through words. It came out through literature. That is what I'm good with words. I do speak it. Like you said, you could have sung it, but I speak it, but I write it and I also perform it. So again, it's that moment with me was crucial because it's like for my own healing, this has to happen for myself. It has to happen, or either if I was going to die inside, and I was like, I'm not going to die with this in me, literal death. I'm not dying with this inside of me. This has to come out so I can live.
That's beautiful. Anyone else want to talk about developing stories that inspire? Ashley, I think you were about to say something before RJ started. I don't think she can hear me.
She's not looking.
Okay. I think we lost her. So this is exactly what it's about. There's so much into being a writer. I think you all can agree. This is not a fate of heart type of situation. You have to make a lot of contracts, what I call, with yourself, with the world, because you are making a decision to expose something about you in your work. Even if you write a character, as I actually said, about a dragon, you better believe people are reading into it. When I wrote my first book, I had family say to me, am I in it? Is this character me? I wasn't ready for that because, like I said, I was having fun in writing. I wasn't thinking about the world seeing it as Michelle is exposing something. We want to dissect it and figure out what it is that she's trying to tell the world. And if it's pain, of course, people want to figure out, is it you? You just wrote a character about a girl that committed this or did that. Is it you? So I really think that as writers, we have to take it very serious that what we write inspires. That's just bottom line. What we write inspires. And we have to know that and not worry and stress about it, but sign the contract with yourself that if I'm going to do this and be good at it, if I'm going to be the Cadillac of this thing, then I'm going to have a level of transparency and honesty and authenticity so that my readers can learn something from it. You know, because everybody on this screen made that decision that it's okay to share something about themselves and they're comfortable with it. And if not, Why not? Anybody?
I think what I'll add to that too is more on the technical side, because I 100% believe in transparency and authenticity. I think because we are speaking to Black writers, I think that I start with the mentality that Black people are an authority in the genre I'm writing. It's my job to find them, because I believe that when you read somebody's work, when I read your work, I can tell how much you read, and that's on a technical side. So it's like, if you need to make sure you're reading your genre. Like, developing stories that inspire means you should know what the rules of your genre are, what the trends in your genre are. If you're trying to use a trope that was trending 20 years ago and bringing it back, then you better have a damn good reason for why you're bringing back this dated trope or this dated ideology. Like, why did you do that? So I think when you're developing a story, yes, there's a part that starts here in your heart. You're dealing with yourself, your insecurities, your demons, your past. But there's an intellectual side of that too, of what are the technical rules of the story you're telling? What are the chapter lengths? What are the page lengths, the word count? Because even if you have a really great story, if you're not abiding by the chapter, word count, the formatting rules of that, like how are characters typically developed? Like, what's the expectation of world building in the story you're telling? And find Black writers that have already done it. There's hardly any genre I can even think of where there's not a very strong Black writer. In the murder mystery, I talked about Walter Mosley. If you're even doing like comedy writing, like Kesey Lehman is hilarious. Like, my boyfriend put me on to her. So funny. Like, obviously people know about the Toni Morrisons, but it's like there's Eric Jerome Dickey as well. Like, find the authors that are in that genre and learn from them. Because it's hard for us to get in the same room with these people, possibly because they passed on or just because they're just out of our scope. But if you read their work, you are sitting at their feet and learning from them. So it's like, if you're stuck on what to write, maybe you haven't read enough. Like, reading should always preclude writing, in my personal opinion. Like, yes, you got to get it out and you're doing a gut check for yourself, but learn the craft too and treat it like a craft. Like, I learned to cook from Bahamian aunties, some of the best cooks and chefs ever. And when I was learning how to cook, they would slap my hand. They would tell me, this tastes bad. This looks ugly. Like, you got to fix this. These ingredients are not fresh. These things don't go together. Was my heart in the right place while I was cooking? Absolutely. My food still tasted bad. So you need to sit at the feet of people that know how to make your book work, make your story work, and make sure that you are putting on the best face for your story, because the last thing you want to do is misrepresent your story because you didn't educate yourself on your craft. So for me right now, a big part of 2020 for me was work and study and learning these Black authors, learning their story, learning their education, learning their formatting secrets, learning how did they develop character, what are their dialogue secrets, why does this dialogue work really well over here when Walter Mosley does it, but over here Octavia Butler did something completely different, but it still works. Like, why? Is it the genre? Is it the time of year it was written? Like, what is it? So I think in that development, there's a heart check and there's a head check, and then that ego check of getting your work edited and critiqued by other people in the genre, and not taking it personally. You know, my dad, the last thing I'll say on that is, my dad has an expression, my dad's a pastor in the Bahamas, where he says, you eat the part of the fish that applies to you. Now, if you're not someone who eats fish, don't get too caught up in that. Get caught up in the fact in the Bahamas, we eat fish head. Maybe in the States, that's not what y'all eat. Okay, then that part doesn't apply to you. So eat the part of the fish that applies to you. Means you do your due diligence, you research your genre, you read stories similar to yours, you come to seminars like this, and you learn from people who are doing it, and then whatever we say that applies to you, put that on your plate and go ahead and eat it. If it doesn't apply to you, let it go. But development is a lot of pieces. It's not just, I have something to say, it's how are you going to say it? Is the timing right? And is this formatting sensible based on the market you're trying to sell the story in? So,
and I think that it's a great conversation to have, almost a side conversation. And RJ told me the first roundtable we did was on self-publishing 101. And I'm going to dip into it for a second because you said something, Ashley, that I think is so important. And when I put the word of developing, I totally agree. I 100% agree that developing a story is about developing it from a professional writer's perspective. The challenge with that, which I think is also becoming a hindrance to us as writers, is that self-publishing allows any and everybody to publish.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of what is out there, we want to inspire, we want to showcase these great stories, but we're not following a lot of the strict techniques
Yeah.
that make a good book a good book. Not all of us, but some of us. And so I definitely think, I don't want to go back to our first roundtable, but I would love to, when we have it again, you come on and let's talk about this, because you're absolutely right. I have a PR firm, so I write all day, every day, and everything I write goes to an editor. Everything. I don't care what. That's me. I self-published a book. I remember when I wrote my first book and someone said, "Oh, there was a misspelled word in it." I think I cried. I literally cried because it was just like, "Oh my God, I don't want that to represent me." However, it happens. But with self-publishing, there's a lot of work that's out there that goes out unedited, unformatted. I read it all the time. It definitely happens. So if we are going to develop stories that inspire, there definitely is something we have to talk about around the technique of it. I 100% agree. And then
technique and type will tell a story. Yeah,
yes,
type will tell a story, and it can be more distracting than the story you're actually trying to tell.
Absolutely. And I think, but I would love to, something you said, it made me, and I know that, we have so much love for our Black writers that are popular, but we have a page of thousands of writers who are new and independent. And I want to see us more look to them as examples as well, because I have read some amazing independent work, stuff that should be on the bestsellers list, but doesn't get that place because of the fact that it's either self-published and doesn't get the mass marketing behind it. So I definitely agree with you. However, I want us to, I want to make sure that everyone knows that every time we have these roundtables, we are pushing for people to write professionally. And that is so important, because we can't keep this craft alive if we're not doing it in a way that is going to be consumed by the mass market, by the market in general. I don't have mass, we just have a market for it. There's no market if we are lowering the standards for the writing. Right. So I'm a huge believer in that, because I read so many book synopses, and sometimes I am just amazed that a good book has a bad book synopsis. People are not going to read the book. We got to get some of these small things in order. But to move forward, anyone else have anything to say about inspiring, developing an inspiring story? And I just wanted to say this about my own work. I wrote my first version of my second book, and I was in a writer's group. And I remember someone read my first draft, maybe 10 pages of it. And I remember she looked at me and she said, "This is so sad. Like, I can't even read this anymore. It's so sad." My first thought was, I won't tell you what my first thought was. I would just say that I was kind of like, should I care? It's what was in me. Should I care? But then I started to say, well, I am writing for a reader. Who do you write for? That's what I want to ask everyone. The reader, or you? And if you want to give it to me in percentages, please do. Andrew?
I'll say this because I know I've got to hop off shortly. Okay. But I think the operative lens that I try to do is be authentic and be accessible. So when you're doing that, you're really writing for both. You're writing for you because this is the direction or topic you're trying to, talk about, or this is the narrative you want to put out there. But you're also trying to make sure that it's what reader accessible. And it's kind of borrowing from what you hear in education. You meet the reader, you meet the person where they are and give them a moderate challenge. So when they hit that challenge, they'll want to not just support you, but support that genre. So that I think that kind of embodies some of the things that were talked about in regards to whether, traditional publishing or self-publishing. You want it to be as sound as possible. You want it to be as credible as possible. Your name's attached to it. You want it to be as credible as possible. But for me, I really am writing for both. And because, like I said, I've done poetry, I've done the inspirational piece. I've done the sports piece. So yeah, those are things I'm interested in. But I know that I can't just focus purely on my interest. I have to make sure, and like was said earlier, it's balanced between people who are familiar with the genre, but also introducing that new set of people. So now if you're introducing more people, guess what? It can be a bridge for the broader support that needs to happen for, any author.
Mm-hmm.
So it's bigger than just you. It's bigger than just you. And it comes back to what I said before. There's enough seats at the table. Everyone can get a plate. So in like everyone said, in being dedicated to the craft and being as balanced as you can be with your approach, it's not only helping you, but it's helping everybody. And that's the whole point that's the whole end game. So we are doing a better job of supporting our screenwriters, our professional writers, our poets, things along those lines. So that's really what I try to do as best as possible. But so on that note, I'm going to excuse myself.
Thank you so much for being a part of the roundtable.
It's a pleasure, and continued well wishes to everybody. Seriously, keep moving forward. So I'm going to go. I'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We may have a couple more people to chime in. I was going to take a break at some point, but we've been talking and moving things along. So let's not stop here. I want to get that question answered by everyone. Are you writing for yourself, or are you writing for the reader?
Oh, like I mentioned before, it's for me and them. So, or whoever. It may not be that particular reader, but it's for both.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's for my internal healing, and in hopes for, like I said earlier, somebody else that could be able to get out of this situation or have some type of courage, or, okay, well, this person did it and they were able to express it this way, then I can too. Just to get them started writing. I've taught writing to teenagers, especially teenagers, that they have situations in their lives too. Let's just get this out. Get this out on the paper. We'll worry about developing it later. That's what I tell my students every day. Get this out, because you have a lot of stuff in you to come out that can get on this page, and you can use to structure, develop, and do it however you need to do it. So, like I said, it's for me and them.
Great. Alexandria?
I would say that I write mostly a lot more narrative nonfiction and service pieces, so I have to be somewhat conscious of my audience because the information is for them, especially I guess when sharing about something that's traumatic. I didn't think about that the first time I wrote my story on depression, and then I was kind of going back and realizing maybe some of what was shared was a little bit it was triggering in a sense, but at the same time, you can't really always seek to please your audience. But I do like to think about it because I'm also trying to offer information in a way that will support readers who are dealing with that mental health challenges and wanting to access healing. So I like to be a little more cautious about it than usual. Yeah.
Great. Ashley?
I write enough for myself that I don't get bored with the story and keep writing. So it's like I want to write something that I would read, So I think that a bit of me is always going to be in the story. I like to entertain myself, but I think you kind of get to that point where the character sort of takes the wheel and they're like, I got it. I know where the story is going to go. So I feel grateful when I get to that point where the character is driving and I can feel that they're telling me about this story, even though I'm the typist. They're like telling the story, if that makes sense. I know that's like too woo-woo, but I have to like the story. I think that is fundamentals. If I don't like this story, if I'm just writing it just because vampires are trending or witches are trending, I may not finish it just because I'm a little bit nonconformist in my personality anyway. But I write enough for myself where I like it and I will finish it. But at the same time, I am a Capricorn. I like to research markets. I like to look at what's on the book charts, then read those books. And then like, if I'm like picking a certain genre, I want to know, well, what's been made in that genre? What's like top 10 in that genre? So it's like, that's just a bit of my like personality though. Like how I like to work on anything. I want to know what everybody else already did. Not so I can copy it, but so I can make sure I'm not copying it inadvertently. You know, because I'm like, oh crap, I didn't realize this story already exists. Can I still write it, or what else do I need to do? So I'm writing a bit of mix for both, but I think if I don't even know who my audience is, if I haven't done that research, then I don't know what's gonna happen with the story.
I think we lost her.
What did we lose her? I don't know why my lens keeps going out of focus. Sorry, y'all. We're so big now. Oh my goodness.
I think we lost Michelle.
Yeah, she'll come back. There you are. We missed you.
Yeah, sorry. So I love that. And now that it's all ladies, let's talk about this thing about writing and being a lady, a woman,
Ooh, yeah.
and the transparency and, you know, the pain. I enjoy, you know, I say this every time I have these calls, but I love talking to writers. You are the most insightful group of people. And I say that not just because it's what I feel, but look at who's always doing the commentating on the news. It's always a writer, really, an author, a reporter, because we all have to do our homework. You cannot be a writer without doing some level of work. You've got to do the work up front. And so I love that. But as women and dealing with our pain, you know, so many of us are taught to not discuss it. You tuck it away. um you don't deal with it. You definitely don't deal with it out in the open. I can't prove this, but sometimes I feel like there is a sense of, you know, as a female writer, I am conscious of the fact that I am a female writer. You know, I'm not saying that someone is making me conscious, but I am conscious of it. Um, I always think back, and I like to read the classics. So I think about Zora Neale Hurston and how her sexuality was such a conversation. This lady was brilliant. Okay, she dies for her story is just amazing, but yet and still, I always wonder if she was a man, would that have been her story? I think about, you know, all of the writers. Like I said, I love the classics. I am very much so into, you know, I read a lot of my, not her poetry. I read a lot of her books because it was her story and the fact that she had done so many amazing things. Let's talk about the idea of writing through our pain as women. What does that mean to you? What is it that you feel like, or do you feel like there are areas where we are being still kind of, you know, told to watch it, you know, or do you feel that in the 21st century you can openly discuss anything and still get the respect that you deserve behind your work?
From when you say respect, are you talking about the male counterparts, or are you talking about the white
Just in general, male, just in general, as a writer, do you feel like there are areas that we are still struggling to be heard in as writers?
Mm.
And anybody else? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so, because I think that the reason I say yes is because when we say certain genres, women's names are like not the first thing you even think of. You know, if I say sci-fi, fantasy, horror, thriller, did any woman come in your mind? Like, you probably pictured the story, but was that story written by a woman? And I think because we still have these gender assigned narratives with certain genres, we still have some work to do. But I think that's where it comes into women, like supporting other women, pushing other women, even pushing your book clubs to include women authors. I actually got into it with someone in a book club years ago because she was only pushing highly feminine women books. Like, which is nothing wrong with that. I ghost wrote romance. I paid for my whole grad school. If I did not have those contracts, and the funny part was most of my clients that I wrote their romance novels were white men and Asian men. but I'm a Black woman writing their books for them. You know what I mean? But it's like in the book club, I had mentioned to her, I said, hey, when we do thrillers, you never pick Black women or women at all. And then she's like, that's not really a woman's genre. I pick women for like, and then she started like putting Christian books in it. And it was like a non-religious group. So like her whole perspective was just that if it's a Christian book or if it's a romance, we will bring a woman author. But if we're going to bring in like a psychological thriller or a murder mystery, then it's a man. And so I think as women, we have to deal with our own biases as well, because I'm a woman, she's a woman, and I approached her about it, and she was like, she was not happy with me. So I think, you know, and to me, if I saw it in her, that means it exists in me, meaning I have a bias. I don't think we can recognize bias in other people unless it already exists in you. You're seeing a reflection of yourself in someone else. So I had to then dig and say, okay, well, if I see it in her, where is it in me? So yes, it exists, and I think it starts at home with women, because we can't control everything out there, but at least when we have our groups, make sure you're going over the spectrum of women authors. Don't just put us in a box, and stretch yourself to read it, you know, like stretch yourself to find women authors that read something you don't expect women to write. Because that's what I'm trying to work on, because there's certain things I don't associate always with women. I'm going to butcher her name, but Tananarive Due writes horror, thriller, and I just read her book, The Good House, and it's a psychological thriller, and it's so good. Because when I read psychological thrillers, I usually read white men. So I was like, let me intentionally dig and find this. I didn't even have to dig that hard. She was right there. It was just me. Like, I just didn't look for her. So, yeah, we have to do the inner work. Society definitely has work to do too, but I think with women, it would behoove us to do the work ourselves, and on our platforms promote women authors as well, not just our stuff. Because men be getting on my nerves with these book lists and these groupings. They do, but I mean, I also want to do the work myself.
For me,
Absolutely. Love it.
For me, I would say yes, because it does exist. I've seen it, but no, because
Oh, we lost her.
Her voice went up.
Technology.
Yeah.
As always.
okay.
Let's see. There she is.
There we go.
Okay, we lost.
Yes, that for me, I'm gonna say it anyway, because there was an instance I wrote a poem. It's interesting you brought that up, because I wrote a poem about the injustices of Black people. And so there was a stanza at the end that was pretty powerful, because it named all of the injustice, well, not all, but the most recent injustices of the people that have recently passed. And I named them, the men were by last name. And when I mentioned the women, they had their full names. And I did that intentionally. And I know why I did that. And it's because they are looked at or put behind the burner. You may mention them fleeting, but it's always the males up front. The male. When everyone has been hurt. So in saying that, one of the males said to me, it was a man, and said, well, he felt that it was being disrespectful because I didn't mention the men's name. I wasn't looking at it that way, as being disrespectful. However, their names was mentioned. So in saying that, I'll say something back anyway. Because first of all, this is my writing. This is coming from a Black woman's perspective. And I'm not being disrespectful at all. Simply because everyone is mentioned in there. I just highlighted the women because I felt like the women needed to be highlighted. So in saying all of that, I'll say it anyway.
Yeah, and we've also made it socially acceptable to erase women's last names depending on who they marry. That's socially acceptable. So if you put a woman by her last name and she marries somebody else, if that's her choice, her whole identity just changed just because she decided to get married. So it's like, men, when is their last names ever really changing? I mean, yes, we could definitely use like slavery as an example, but for women, you almost need their full name because it is socially acceptable to erase half of a woman's name. That is socially acceptable, that the name she was born with is no longer good enough because she chose to get married. So it's like, okay, what if Sandra Bland was married to somebody? If I say Bland, or is it Bland hyphen Smith? Like, you see what I'm saying? But if I said Martin, mean Trayvon Martin? Is that who you're talking about? You know what I mean? So it's like we're programmed to think of women a different way. She has a full identity, half woman, half man. So, and that male last name is how we identify her, and that first name is how we separate it from all the other women who had their identities erased. So it's like, I get why you did that. Like, let men start changing their last names when they marry somebody, you know, and then we can have a different discussion, but that's not socially acceptable. Men would be like, my last name for a woman? But why not? Why is my last name changing for you? I thought we were equal.
Yeah, they go toe to toe with me a lot with the writing, but I don't care. Like I said, I say it anyway and do it.
Yeah, I love it. Yes, your story. It's your story.
I think you have to. I mean, I remember in college, a professor saying that we are the authors of our own stories. It is a very true statement. We have to own our stories, stand behind them, own what we say, stand behind it. Those are some very key pieces to being a good writer. And being a writer is like I said, it's tough. You can't hide once you become a writer, and people are looking at what you wrote. They're trying to see what of that is part of is you. They are amazed. I had people amazed that I remember someone saying to me after my first book, I didn't know that you could do this. It was almost like I said, well, I've been writing my whole life. Like, because I wrote my book and I didn't tell anybody. It wasn't that it was a secret. It was just one of those things where I didn't think it was a conversation worth having because I always wanted to be a writer. And I kind of thought everyone knew that about me. I always wanted to be an author. So when I wrote and published my book, I remember having to have conversations with family and friends about why I wrote it and where did the idea come from. And I'm like, we have great, I have an amazing imagination. I love to write. I don't want you to think that, it's like we're as women, we can sometimes be put in these little cuppy holes. You can only do this thing. And if you are a wife, a mother, you can't be an entrepreneur, a writer, a design. We're still in that world where there's only so much that you should be allowed to do. And it's not fair, but it is still real. And so that's another reason why this whole conversation about pain is important, because as women, we deal with a lot of pain on levels that a lot of men don't have to deal with. When you hear about abuse, you immediately think about a woman being abused. You rarely hear a man saying he's been abused by a woman. It happens. But typically when you hear that there is spousal abuse, you think of us. Rape, you think of a woman. Incest happens both ways, absolutely. But you think typically of a woman in those lights. There's a lot of things there that are very much so related to how people see and think of women. But yet, so many of us as writers worry about putting it in the world as if the world don't even already know that these things are happening to us. So we have to have a level of transparency and honesty and authenticity in what we do. And we have to stand behind what we do. And like you did, RJ, I'll battle you. I'll battle you on this feeling because I, as a writer, own my own story and I should be able to write my truth. And so that's very
feedback, especially if your feedback's just rooted in misogyny, like you're not really adding to the conversation. Your misogyny was just triggered. So that's why you're commenting. Like, that's just what, sir? The door is over there. Please. See yourself. Yeah. I think also too is I think where some women may, and I just want to encourage all the women that are here, and then the women that will see this. I know you may be worried because society does make judgments about women authors depending on their content. Like, I used to write BDSM, I did very well writing it. Like, that's what people are going to be like, oh my gosh, is she in the community? Was she doing that? So there's the fear. But because I knew I was writing it for somebody else, for a man can write that and no one's going to think that he's swinging from leather poles. Like, even if and if he is, they're like, oh, that's quirky that Jim does that. But then here's his book. But it's like, as a woman, can you write about serial killers and gore and stuff and nobody think that you're crazy? Men do it all the time. And no one's like, he's the weirdo, it's because they separate the story from the author. And there's this conflation that happens with women authors where you think, because I wrote this, I did this. Sir, the genre, the category is fiction. Like, what do you mean? It's fiction for a reason. It's made up. I'm not an actual serial killer. Why would I write that? if I was, confess. Like,
Mhm.
it's a story. But there is this thing where it's just like, woman, story, same thing. And it's like, no, I am a creator. I created a universe that you were a part of. But that does not mean that I'm going out at night butchering people. It's
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And when my first book, like I said, my main character was a Caucasian male, I got a lot of feedback about that. I didn't think anything of it. And
yeah.
I still don't. But I did. I got a lot of comments about, well, why couldn't you have been a black man? I wrote the book because I was having a bad day at my job, and I built the character around a CEO that I didn't particularly like. I never thought anything of the fact that a black woman should not be building a character about a Caucasian, a white man.
They do it to us all the time.
I
They
never
All the
thought
time.
about it.
they
I
even voice black
know,
cartoon
but
characters. Like,
and it was,
All the
mhm,
time.
mhm,
that's what I'm
mhm.
saying, because it's white seems
Yeah.
loose.
I mean, I would have people saying, "Is he white?" Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it does lend to, that ownership piece that you have to have with your work, is that you have to stand
Mm-hmm.
behind it and be fierce, because you will get questioned. How dare you have an opinion about something that, something like this? Oh no, what they're really saying is, how dare you be that creative? That's how I look at it. How dare you be
And
that
also,
creative? Like,
how dare you have an opinion about white people?
yeah, yeah, how dare you? And it's and
Facts.
it blew me away,
Facts.
because most of the people who were questioning me were black people who felt like, well, why would you build a character? It was almost like you honored him by building a character around him. I said, you got to read the book. He deals with his own racism, his own racist ways and ideology. He deals with a lot of things. But the fact that that was something that is a taboo situation, to build a character that doesn't look like you. If I'm not writing urban fiction, you shouldn't be writing anything. And it goes back to what you're saying about dark fantasy and all these other genres are missing
Mm-hmm.
our voices, because we are still being expected to only write certain things. We're only supposed to write about your life, your experiences. How dare you know about a dragon? How can you make that dragon do these amazing things? Or those
Mm-hmm.
vampires? Or you
Mm-hmm.
don't supposed to know. When I read Kindred by Octavia Butler,
Ooh, that's a
changed
good
my
one.
life. Oh my God. I was like,
That's a good one.
and I read this years ago. I mean, I probably was in college, maybe high school. I remember, it was a long time ago. And I remember thinking, how beautiful. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but how many Octavia Butlers do we hear about now? I know they're out there, but how many other Black women are writing in that sci-fi world that's getting the type of love? Actually, she just became a New York Times bestseller in 2020. Do you guys know that? Her book just was the
Wow.
recipient in 2020. All the success she had when she was on this earth, and it took her to
Mm-hmm.
2020 to get that recognition, and that speaks
Mm-hmm.
volumes to what we're
Yes, it
talking
does.
about right now. So we're
Yeah.
going to wrap up. I thank you guys so much. We have two other areas. We've kind of covered them. One was transparency in our work. The other we didn't talk about was more around faith in writing, but I feel like we've covered a lot of that. If you guys want to chime in on faith in writing, and I say that because so much is not to say that everyone believes, but there is a lot of African American writers with a strong um, usage of faith in their work. I know I do, even though I write, my first book was Christian fiction, although my character never steps foot in a church. And my second book has kind of an undertone. It's not required. I know everybody isn't a believer, but I do like the idea. I do see a lot of that in the work, especially when it comes to writing about our trauma and our pain, is that a lot of it is about the redemption that we have is around faith and growing to love ourselves and accept ourselves. And that is a big piece, that I'm seeing more and more on the page. So if anybody wants to talk about their faith in writing, please do so at this time.
To me, believing is just what it is. Believing you can do something. What they say that faith is a substance of things that are hoped for, but evidence of things not seen. Okay, you don't see the book. You see the book, but you don't see the book literally in your hand. So you believe that you can write this book, regardless as to what anybody else may think or say about you. You still have that inner strength of belief of something of hope that this can happen. And I believe that my ancestors their foundation is built on hope. Their foundation is knowing that we do this. This is what we do. So to me, it just comes from, I think my ancestors is feeding it and it's coming from within. So I believe it, I see it, and I do it.
I love that.
Period.
Alexandra, you want to speak to it? I mean, with mental health, and do you write mostly around faith or around more technical forms of mental health?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of both, and I do think I guess just even starting on my journey, my own personal journey, it did stem largely from my faith because, as I mentioned, a lot of what I was seeing within a church context, and I think overall, am I echoing? Okay. So I think overall, there's also a lot of spiritual undertones in my work, especially when I talk about resilience after trauma, and even my own experience as a teenager. Just how I believe that I was saved at the age of 17 from committing suicide. So there is a huge part of faith in my work, even if I don't directly talk about it. I do think that there is a connection there. I wouldn't even be, I don't think, writing if it wasn't for just believing that I can do that, because I've always felt largely like an underdog. And so just learning that through my writing, I can have a voice and be able to express a lot of what I've gone through and why I live the way I do, and the messages of courage and hope can be you can see that a lot even in books that are not even faith-based. I see that. I draw a lot of inspiration from non-faith-based films talking about. I see faith in it, even if they're not talking about God or anything, because just the whole overall human experience and surviving or overcoming pain and trauma is a survival story. It's beautiful. It's resilient, and it's powerful. So I think even if there's never expressly directly stated, faith does have a lot to do with a lot of storytelling and writing and overall.
Absolutely. Ashley, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think faith and I think self-discovery should be a part of every story. And if you do self-discovery through a godhead or an institution or a pantheon, whatever you believe in, that's fine. I think at the end of the day, nothing should be in a story just for the sake of being in the story. It should enhance the story, expand it. If you need faith to be a better writer, then use it. But if you're just using faith just for kicks and giggles, then I would say don't use it, because it's not making the story better. I think at the end of the day, whatever technique you use, whatever's a part of your craft, should make the story, the character journey, the plot better. And I don't think faith should be separate from that conversation. I think sometimes you're a believer and you don't want to be a believer in your story because you think it won't sell, but then your story feels half-assed because you can tell a part of you is missing. But if you're not a believer and then you put that in there because you're trying to trick people, then it also feels phony because you're like, that's not even what you believe. So at the end of the day, it's about authenticity, coming back to that. If this is who you are, then let that be who you are, And if you don't know how to do it, see how other people have done it. Ask questions, pray. If you're a person that fasts and use these spiritual practices to align yourself more with who you are, so because that'll come out in your story. You can just tell when a writer is coming from a place when they have figured out a lot of things about themselves, because that helps them to figure out things about their character. So yeah, if faith is true to you, then show it. But at the end of the day, even if you're not calling it faith, there should be self-discovery in your pages. Your character should learn something about themselves. We should learn something about ourselves through your character. I don't feel like self-discovery can just be thrown out because you say, I'm not a Christian. Well, nobody said you were, but your story is still vapid. There's no depth, So it's you can call it faith, you can call it depth, you can call it self-discovery, but we should feel something. We can just tell when a story's at the surface. Even if it's a children's book, get down there, get deeper. And that might be spirituality, that might be Christianity, Buddhism, whatever it is. But if it's authentic, we will know. we will know.
I love that. I love that. Ladies, this has been great. And I want to wrap up with some words of encouragement from each of you. However, I wanted to say that, to be honest with you, this was a hard topic for me because I interview authors all the time. And I love talking to writers. And there's always someone to say something that'll like take me back, because we're all coming from different places in our work. Some of us come from a complete place of pain.
Yeah.
They've been hit hard with a lot of different things and they want to write about it. And so I enjoy listening to it, but it's also a situation where we all take it differently. It's like, you want to talk about pain? Why do we have to talk about pain? Why not talk about joy? Was about writing through something that really drives a lot of us, even those of us who may not think we're being driven by it in some ways. And it doesn't mean that it makes us worse or bad people. It just sharpens us. It makes us stronger. And what it does also, it allows us to get to a place of authenticity that is needed in our work. And that's where I'm glad this is where I wanted this conversation to go, which is really to a place of being authentic. And when I say authentic, I mean, if I want to write about pain and that is my truth, I would love to know that the community supports it, but also, as Ashlia mentioned, knowing that there's still a standard of writing in that. There has to be a standard of writing, that it can't just be dump all my pain on the pages and that's the story. That there needs to be something there that inspires, that takes the reader to the level I want them to go in. And that is very, very important to me. So this was a hard one to tackle because could have gone in so many different directions. And I thank you all for allowing it to do just what I wanted it to do, which was to expose the pain that we're writing through, but also to understand that in order to write, you have to be authentic and real. But in order to get to authenticity, which is a whole nother roundtable, is about you knowing who you are as a writer and accepting who you are as a writer. And everyone here, we're doing some different things, but I feel like everyone, when you sit down to write, you're like, this is who I am and I'm going to stand behind it. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think that's what a lot of our writers on the page each year is that, as a writing prompt, write down the things that gets you to, a place of authenticity. And what does being authentic mean? And Alexandra, you said something about family keep you real. Yes, if it's your family, your friends, your husband, your children. Oh, children have a way of keeping you real. Mom, you wrote this. This is not you. This isn't, this doesn't even sound like you. That's whatever you can get to, go there, because I don't want to see anyone write a book from a place that isn't deep. Because when I read it, I want to know you. When I read Butler's book, I felt like this lady is so complex.
Yes.
She's dreaming and waking up a slave. Like, that was beautiful to me. There's so much beauty in the work, but you have to get to a place of authenticity in order to really find it. And if writing through the pain is your truth, then we stand behind it. So if everybody want to give a few words of encouragement to those writers out there who are struggling, they're writing a story. It is a story that's going to expose some things about themselves. They're not sure what to do. Like I said, I held my book for 6 years because I didn't want people to think I was about to expose them in this book. But you know what I did? I asked God about it. I went to a few family members and explained to them, this isn't you. Before we even have this conversation, this isn't you. So we don't have this issue down the line, but I'm going to put this book out because it's my truth and I'm going to write my truth. And I'm not here to expose anything or anybody, but I'm not also going to censor myself because I've got to worry that someone is going to feel a little uncomfortable that the character had a hairstyle like they had. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I did, and I went forth, and I'm very happy. It was my therapy. I needed to get that book out. The world needed to see it, and I know that the world needs to see everything that each one of you and everybody on the page is writing. So that's my inspiration, is to keep writing, Don't
Yes.
worry about it. Keep writing. Find your honest place. Write those things down. Figure out how to, journal, grief journal, whatever type of journaling you need. But when you go to that paper, it needs to be your truth, and we will all respect it and love it. So you want to take your turn and just give a couple of words of encouragement, and then we're going to get ready for the next roundtable in March.
Oh,
Anybody?
well,
Mhm.
I would earlier, Michelle, just like I always said, no matter what anyone says or does, you just do you and write your story. Student of mine like to write Gothic work, Gothic poetry, Gothic stories. And one of the classmates said, "Why do you always write something dark all the time?" I said, "Because this is her. So let her write what she writes." So I had to to help um, train the class with that. And I would say, write what you write until you are comfortable with exploring other genres. And always, like you said, always stand behind what you write and why you're writing it. Because it's always someone around to turn you or deter you from what your truth is, but you have to know what it is and stand in that. So, if that can encourage anyone to do so, please stand firm. Like, don't move.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great. Anyone else?
Well, I can say that as someone wanting to take at a place where I'm wanting to take my writing to the next level, I can say that don't be afraid to really tap into your voice. And I know that sometimes, especially, I can say I'm a little bit, I have a really quiet temperament. I don't like to rock the boat a lot unintentionally. And I think there's probably a lot of people like that, that, you're afraid to share something because, oh no, I'm going to hurt that person. Or if I'm not an expert on this, or I can't talk about this because it's too controversial. But sometimes you need to kind of be in that place. And it's not about you just trying to cause trouble. It's about the fact that it just has to happen. And I would encourage you to write that story, even if you fear what people might think or what they might say, because I guess this is your life. And I feel writing is a calling. And if you don't write that story, think about what might happen, or the fear what might happen if you don't write that story. So I'm just writing from that place of just wanting to take my writing to a level where it can actually do something and matter to people. And I'm speaking to that person that's maybe working on that story and that wants to kind of do something more and impact the world in a bigger way.
Excellent. Thank you.
Ooh. I guess I'll circle back to our theme of pain. I guess I'll ask the question with another question. Which one is a good parent? The parent that protects their child from all the pain in the world, or the parent that trains their child how to deal with pain? Treat your characters the same way. Pain is not a problem in story. What's a problem in story is not giving your characters the proper skill set to deal with pain in the story, which will then make your plot fall flat. So don't be afraid of pain. Pain is another tool in your little Batman utility belt to push the story forward. Pain is not a problem. Pain is a universal truth. It is unavoidable. If you are going through it, there's probably 6 million other people that are going through it. And guess what? If, let's say, 1 billion people hate your work, there are 7 billion people on the planet. You still have there's 7 billion people who can. I think sometimes as writers, we focus on the people that don't like it, forgetting that there's thousands, hundreds, even if it's tens of people that like it, that is enough. Focus on who your audience is and not who it isn't. Yes, you'll get criticism, but that's life. Yes, you'll get pain, that's life. At the end of the day, I just want to go back to, what was said earlier, write it down and focus on if the pain you're bringing to the story is necessary for the story, or if you're fetishizing pain. So we don't want to make pain a fetish, but if it's a part of the story, that's the truth, tell the truth. Put the pain in the story, but make sure you give the characters the tools to deal with the story so it's believable. It's definitely doable. Don't be afraid of a good outline. Like I have a sketchbook for my stories because I literally sketch when I get panicked when I'm writing, and I sketch out outlines. So figure out a system that works for you. Like literally, like I have these weird maps that I make that's just like, this character believes this. He is attracted to this type of person. This is his favorite food. He believes this politics. This is his astrological sign. And like, it may seem silly, but the reason I'm doing that is to make sure when I put pain points in the story, it makes sense with the person I just outlined and described, right? This may not be a character who would carry a gun and rob a corner store. That's not like, but if you just doing that to fetishize pain, then just be careful with that. But at the end of the day, your story matters, your voice matters. There is an audience for it. There's an audience for it. And if you're thinking in your head a million things can go wrong with your story, I counter that by saying a million things could also go very right.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents. And I appreciate being here, and I appreciate hearing from y'all. I needed the encouragement. Like you, Michelle, my mother passed away, and that's still something I'm processing now. And we lost a family member this week. So it's just been a lot of trying to figure out, like, not just why is this happening to me, but as a writer, how can I use this to help someone going through the same thing? Because you're not alone. You're not, you know, and sometimes it's just a part of the story.
I love that. My book has saved me in many ways. The characters, the writing, the pain that I've had to put out there into the world in my way, and to be able to build a character around it has been so therapeutic for me. And I feel like with us moving out of COVID, it's going to be a lot of writing through the pain.
Yes.
People are dealing with a lot right now, and it's almost like we're holding our breath and we're getting through it. But once we take that next big breath and we realize everything that has happened around us, we will need outlets to deal with it. And writing is going to be one of those outlets. I already see it in myself, and gosh. So yeah, I lost my mother, and it triggered so much in me. And the one thing it did trigger was I knew I had to start writing my books. I always wanted to be a writer. So it was kind of, I wrote my first book at 35 and I published it in 35, but I started writing it the year after she passed. And it was like, time, you got to do this, you got to do it. And that really changed a lot for me. So like I said to everyone, thank you so much for being here. This is a tough subject. I hope this people got something out of it. I know it's going to be on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. You can share it. This has been an excellent conversation with women that I am so proud to have met. You guys have all shared something that has helped me, because every day, I'm sorry, I need encouragement to write. I write so much, and guess what? Some of the stuff I write, no one ever reads it. You know how heartbreaking that can be? And it's not that it's not good. It's just everybody's putting it out into the world. Yeah. And then I'll write something and it gets a lot of attention, and I'm very happy about that. But at the end of the day, it's like you need that motivation to just keep this thing going, because it gets tough. So I just am so happy to have had this opportunity to spend this time with you on a Saturday morning. I hope you guys all have a great weekend. And if you want to, you can, I don't know if you have your chat box, but if you want to tell us how we can get your book, if you have a book out, I don't know. I'm sorry, Alexandra and Ashley, I know you have written books, but do you have a book now that you're looking to promote, or any type of work?
I'll promote Pride Lines for sure. Pride Lines is a web series we're working on that is being it's in the process of being animated. So Pride Lines it's at Pride Lines. You can find it like it's everywhere on social media like that. And we have a Patreon if you'd like to support. The lowest one is $1 a month. I'm the only /lead screenwriter on that, but I do have a children's book that will be coming out in the spring. So my name's Ashlia Anya everywhere. So I'll be putting that marketing stuff out in March. I'm excited. It's called
Great.
called Marty Builds a Wall. So I'm very excited.
Well, congratulations on that. RJ, you want to talk about how to get your book, your title of your book again?
Oh yeah, the title is The Unexpected. That is out right now, and it's on Barnes and Noble, and it is also on Amazon. And you guys aren't here, but it's here in the libraries here. And you can also go to my website and purchase if you like. It's www.authorpoetrjvoice.art.
Great.
You could put
Alexandria?
So I'm working on something right now, but most of what I have available right now is a series of personal essays and articles that kind of help, I guess, student writers or people that are just took a long break from writing and want to get back into it. So that's all available on my, I guess, blogging platform. I'm theheartofthestory.ca, and yeah, that's where they can get that.
Sounds good. And my work is I have 2 books out, The Heart of a Man and From Darkness to Night. Book 1, Family Secrets. I dropped that book in February of 2020. And you can pick up my books at authormichelledjackson.com. Actually running a special. You can buy them both for $20 right now for Black History Month. And so please pick up those books. I really appreciate it. So for everyone out there, thank you so much for being a part of this. There have been some comments, mostly just telling us thank you, great job. No actual questions at this point, but we have actually filled 2 hours of talking about pain. I know that's great. And we're going to have our next roundtable. It's always the 3rd weekend of the month. I don't know the topic yet for March, but I'll be sure to let everyone know. And if you are available, please jump on and let's talk. We've got 2 hours. We're just here to inspire and educate. And I've learned so much from you, from the 4 of you, because Andrew was great as well. And I really have learned a lot. So thank you guys and have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Nice meeting you.
I'm headed into my writers group right now, so I'll see y'all later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.